Welcome to Money Market at Bank of Tampa Podcast. We highlight the businesses, expert business advice, the local economy, and points of interest in the Tampa Bay market. Follow us on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And please share this episode with a friend or colleague. I'm your host, Owen Lefebvre, the Pinellas County Market President for the Bank of Tampa, Tampa Bay's oldest and largest community bank. I'm excited about our guest today. We are joined by the former mayor of Tampa, Bob Buckhorn. Bob, when I was researching you, I didn't realize that you grew up in Falls Church, Virginia.
Mm-hmm. I did. Yeah.
So I lived in Vienna, Virginia for 2 years.
Did you really? How old were you?
I was, it was middle school age.
Okay.
But so where did you go to high school at?
Falls Church High School.
Okay.
Class of 1976.
76. And I don't know if it was there. I think it was there back then, but Oakton?
Yeah, you would have gone to Oakton.
I would have went to Oakton.
Yeah.
So I went to Luther Jackson Middle School.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which was in
right
Falls
on
Church.
Gallows Road.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So
yeah, a lot of my buddies
with
grew up going to Luther Jackson. I went to St. Philip's, which was a Catholic school right down the road from that.
Okay. A small world.
Yeah.
So Penn State grad, Director of Governmental Affairs for the Builders Association, Special Assistant to Mayor Sandy Friedman during her 2 terms. You were 2-term City Councilman, and of course a two-term Mayor of Tampa from 2011 to 2019. You're currently working as a consultant with Shoemaker Advisors on public affairs, strategy, economic, and urban development. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
So married, proud father of 2 lovely girls.
Occasionally they're lovely.
Like all women,
they're
right?
very high maintenance.
So welcome, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for joining us.
Owen, thanks for having me. It's always good to see you, who I've known for a long time, and to be here at the Bank of Tampa, where I have so many great friends.
Yeah, we're delighted to have you, and this is a special treat for me. But I want to share. So in 2010, when you were campaigning, how many doors did you knock on?
My team knocked on 20,000 doors.
That's
through the heat of the summer. I literally have met every dog in the city of Tampa.
I believe it.
And not all of them are nice. I can promise you.
You almost met my dogs, and I love to tell this story because you'd knocked on my door, and I had 2 little kids at the time, and both of them are running to the door, and the dogs are running to the door, and I had no idea who it was, and so I kind of peek out, and I'm like, well, that's City Councilman Bob Buckhorn. I'm like, he's running for mayor. This is interesting. I come out and have a conversation. You're telling me you're knocking on 20,000 doors, and thinking I was being funny, I said, Bob, that's a lot of walking. I think you need a new pair of shoes. And we kind of looked at each other, and you're like, well, I hope you vote for me. And I walked back inside, and my wife was like, who is that? And I was like, it's Bob Buckhorn. I think I insulted the next mayor of Tampa, thinking that you would never know who I was. So you get elected. We're at a conference together. I happen to be speaking on one of the panels, and you're the keynote speaker. And I'm sitting next to a friend of mine who's an attorney, and I tell this story. And he's like, do you think he remembers you? And I'm like, I never remember me. And he's like, I knocked on 20,000 doors, and I knocked on Owen Lefebvre's door. And I'm like, well, that's embarrassing.
That was a race that nobody thought I was going to win. I mean, I was running against some great opponents, including a former mayor, and everybody had written me off. And I think it was those 20,000 doors that we knocked on that made a difference, because people saw and appreciated when I would show up at their door in the middle of the summer. It's 100 degrees out, completely soaking wet, that I wanted this more than my opponents did. And, I was blessed that they gave me the opportunity to serve, but I think it was those doors that made the difference in that race. Because I didn't have all the money. I didn't have all the endorsements.
It was hard. It came down to a runoff, didn't it?
It did, yeah. I finished second in the runoff. And then came back in the runoff and won pretty handily. So, yeah, it was those doors.
And part of that was, you ran a pretty clean campaign, right?
We did. Yeah, we did. And we were pretty effective and pretty efficient, and we had trained and prepared for that moment. The only thing that you can control really is how hard you work. And we just outworked people. We just out-hustled them, out-thought them, out-strategized them, and with the help of the firefighters and a lot of volunteers, we prevailed. And so, yeah, it's people come to me all the time asking for advice what they should do if they're running. And I was like, if you're not raising money, be knocking on doors.
Do you think that kind of strategy would still work today?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. Even in a more cynical environment and a more partisan environment, I think people want to see you. They want to touch you. They want to talk to you. They want to know that you want this job. You're not just going to buy it. And so, yeah, I think it works, particularly at the local level. At a presidential level, it's a lot harder to do.
Well, you can, yeah, right.
But in a mayor's race, if you think about it, there's probably 30,000 people that vote. And, we knocked on 2/3 of the doors of the people that we thought were going to vote. So, yeah, I think it made a big difference. Yeah.
I think so. When someone knocks on my door, unless it's Amazon,
yeah,
we do the who is it? Why are they here? Should I answer?
Yeah, it's
turn the lights off.
It's gotten harder on because for that reason, people are cynical of and nervous about who's at their door. But I do think it still makes a difference. Yeah.
Now, did you get that from Lawton Childs? Walking Lawton?
Walking Lawton, yeah. I think I went through as many pairs of shoes as Lawton Childs did. But I'm just a big believer in it. I mean, mayor's races are a lot different than some of these other races. The relationship that this community has with its mayors is much more personal, much more intimate. They know you. They see you in the grocery stores. They see you at restaurants. They know where you live. You're accessible. You're available to them. And they want to know you. They don't always have to agree with you, but they want to know you and want to kind of get a sense of your soul, if you will. That's hard to do on a statewide race or even a congressional race. But in a mayor's race, they want to see you and touch you and feel you. And that's oftentimes why negative advertising in a mayor's race doesn't work very well. Because most of the folks in this city that are voting in a mayor's race know the candidates. They know them personally. And so when some consultant launches some wacky attack on you, most folks are like, no, I know the guy. I've grown up with him, or I went to school with him, or I've seen him. That's not who he is. And so it's a different dynamic, thankfully.
That's interesting because one of my questions was going to ask, the reason I asked you if you ran a clean campaign, because I remember it, and I think that kind of was the turning tide, if I'm remembering correctly, because I think I don't know that you had Pam Iorio's endorsement until
not till the end,
until things got dirty, and wondering, I feel Trump changed the game. So we went
sadly.
Regardless of what you think of his policies, we went from kind of decorum and a lot of civility to just name calling and you throw the gloves off and so everything feels like that's the environment we're in now. Can you win with a clean campaign?
We as a country, we as a city have serious challenges facing us, and we need serious people who are willing to reach across party lines to find solutions. One of the things that I love most about being the mayor is, I'm a Democrat, but I'm not the Democratic mayor of Tampa. I'm the mayor. And my job was not to get into some of these partisan brawls or talk about social issues. My job was to build a city. And there's no Democratic or Republican way to fix a pothole. You just do it.
Right.
And that's why I loved that job so much, is because I didn't have the time, I didn't have the tolerance, I didn't have the patience for all of that kind of stuff. My job was to transform this city, and I needed help from everybody. I didn't care if you were a vegetarian, a Republican, a Democrat, a Wiccan. I just needed your help to get the job done.
The Wiccan population is well represented.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a Wiccan constituency out there, Owen. I don't know who they are or where they are, but I'm sure they're out there.
The Wiccan's mayor.
Yeah.
I would say the Michael Jordan quote I always love is that, Republicans and Democrats both buy Nikes. And I give you credit. I mean, you were very policy driven. You were pro-business driven. You had mentioned potholes. I remember a number of times, and I never came up to you in the grocery store, but that Publix right there at Platte and Bayshore, I probably saw you a half dozen times, and someone would grab you and have a conversation, and you were always very gracious and generous with your time. And
those were my bosses.
Well, and I had mentioned something at one time, and you're like, people grab me all the time and talk about the potholes and the trash not being picked up.
But that's what's great about being the mayor is you have that kind of relationship with people, and they're not fearful of coming up to you and asking you those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And
approachable. You're always approachable.
I mean, your job is to get it done, and I find, and I'm in Publix a lot. That is my best polling, is walking through a Publix, getting stopped 30 times, taking pictures. People will share with you in the checkout line whatever's on their mind, including the cashiers. And that's how you learn. That's how you hear. So it's, for me, that's a great petri dish of sort of the public opinion.
Well, you're in contact with the people, the everyday people, right?
Even if you're in shorts, flip-flops, and you haven't shaved in 3 days, they're going to stop you and talk to you. And that's fine. That never bothered me.
So you have an amazing ability to recall people's names. And I think of Bill Clinton and Ronald Reagan and LBJ. I mean, they all were known for being able to just remember everybody in the room. Is that something that just comes naturally? Have you cultivated that? Where does that come from?
Yes and no. I mean, it's not something it wasn't a class that I took or a course that I took. It just, I've always found and made an effort to try and remember either the circumstances in which I met them, or their name, or some connection to them, because it's important to them.
People love hearing their name.
They do,
especially when the mayor knows your name.
Well, yeah, and they want to
not necessarily from a stage after you talked about his shoes. But.
Well, busting your chops from the stage was always a pleasure.
Right? You did a fair amount of that.
Yeah, you didn't give me water at the front door that day, so I'm going to wear you out for the next 20 years. But people want to be appreciated, and they want to be recognized, and they want their issues to be heard. And so, if you can personalize it and make them feel that they are important, because they are. I've always found that to be, that gets you 90% of the way to common ground. And so,
So is there a tactic? So I've got Ron Weaver.
Yeah.
I'm sure you know Ron Weaver. Yeah. But Ron Weaver is coming on the podcast too. And Ron, I haven't had an opportunity to have him on yet and ask this question, but he will take you through almost while he's like, incite, well, remember this time, how's this person? And then kind of puts it all together. Hey, Owen, nice to see you.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, I've known him for 30 years.
Yeah, and you've had the same conversation with him for 30 years.
the start to the conversation.
Yeah, the weave is legendary.
He is.
And his is a more curated, calculated process that he goes through. Mm-hmm. For me, I'm just lucky. I just have the ability to retain.
It's amazing. It's an amazing gift.
Well, I am lucky. The older I get, I'm not as good as I once was.
The Toby Keystone.
Yeah, but I'm as good once as I ever was. So it's it's just something I worked on, and
It's I can remember faces, but names oftentimes escape me. So nicely done. What called you to politics initially?
It's funny, Owen. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, as you did. My father was a reporter there. And so, as you know, in the D.C. area, politics is like malaria.
Never heard of it.
Once you get it, you get the bug. You can't get rid of it. And so when you grow up there, particularly with a dad who was a reporter, politics was the currency of the day, all day, every day. Just like in New York, it's about money. It's about finance. In D.C., it's about politics and public affairs and public service and global events. And so, I grew up with the Washington Post on my door every day. I delivered the Washington Post as a kid. My mother tells the story of people would start calling about 7 o'clock, where's my paper? And she would go out looking for me, and I'd be sitting on the curb reading the paper, even as a young kid.
That's amazing.
And so
were you delivering papers with Watergate?
Yeah. Oh, that was my era that I grew up in.
Okay, yeah.
We moved there in 61. Right before the John F. Kennedy got elected, and obviously as Irish Catholics, that was a momentous occasion in our lives. And so it was an exciting time, Camelot, the excitement of a young, good-looking, wealthy president really captivated the country, and so it captivated me as well. And so in 1968, when Bobby Kennedy was running, I was 10. And I used to have my mother drop me off at Bobby Kennedy's presidential campaign headquarters as a 10-year-old.
Wow.
And leave me there.
It really was in your blood.
Yeah, it was. And so I would stuff envelopes or do whatever they needed me to do. But I caught the bug then and knew that I wanted to serve. And, ever since then, I've been on that path largely of public service. When I got out of college, I wanted to serve our country, got selected for Navy flight school. Went down to Pensacola Naval Air Station to start aviation officer candidate school. Unfortunately, they diagnosed me as having a degeneration of one of my corneas and discharged me. But that's how I ended up in Tampa. I had a 1966 Dodge Dart. I had $300 in discharge pay. I had nowhere else to go. The Dodge Dart had no air conditioning. I had one suit. And I drove from Pensacola Naval Air Station to Tampa, Florida, where I had a fraternity brother from Penn State who lived here, who had just gotten married. And the last thing his wife wanted to see was me, with good reason.
But they took you in.
They took me in, and I slept on their couch. The wife used to circle the want ads and leave them for me while I was asleep on the couch while they would go to work. But I didn't know a soul. They moved 6 months later. Then I really didn't know a soul.
That's a good friend. Allowed you to stay on the couch for 6 months.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, his wife was not happy about that. And then I just started scratching and clawing my way up. And coincidentally, the diagnosis turned out to be a misdiagnosis.
You could have been Top Gun.
I could have been Top Gun. And my wife is convinced that after swaggering my way through every officers club in the country, that I would have crashed as I buzzed inverted some admiral's daughter, at Mach 3. So yeah, it turned out in a weird kind of way, to my advantage. And so
so you worked for Sandy.
I worked for Sandy Friedman, ran her campaign.
And then city council. So what was that moment that you're like, I'm doing this?
It's interesting. When I worked for Sandy Friedman as her assistant, I saw the ability to move the needle from that office. The way Tampa is structured, it's a very, very strong mayor form of government. Mm-hmm. It has allowed us, because of that charter, to really move this city far more rapidly than other cities. You periodically have city council members who want to erode that strong mayor form of government because they want more power for themselves.
Up every so often.
Which is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. But I saw that was the one place that you could really shape a city and drive a city and create a narrative that could move a city. And so after 8 years with her, I knew that that's where I wanted to be. I didn't want to go to Washington. I wanted to be
that was
mayor.
you wanted to be mayor. So
yeah,
I knew
I
get to be mayor?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I knew the best place, because I was only 30, 31, 32 at the time. So I knew I would have to pay my dues and kind of move up the ladder. And that's when I ran for city council and got elected twice. Ran for mayor in 2003 and lost to Mayor Iorio, who was a dear friend of mine. To this day, we're best friends. She beat the tar out of me. And then I was out in the wilderness for 8 years, and then came back in 2010 in that
But consulting, right? Political consulting?
Yeah, I was doing public affairs for a firm out of Boston here. And that came back in 2010 in that race that we talked about earlier, where nobody thought I was going to win because I had lost before, which is a great story for young people and for my kids. It's not about how you get knocked down, but it's about how you get back up.
Yep.
And then won that race, and then was lucky enough to do 2 terms.
What is being mayor like day to day?
It's the best job in America. I mean, it really is. Political job in America, because you have the opportunity to build a city. And for me, I loved, and I hope it was obvious, and I hope it was contagious, and I think it was. I loved going to work every day. I could not wait to get.
So you had great energy.
Oh.
I mean, you were, and I hate to use this term, but I don't have a better one. I mean, you were Tampa's biggest cheerleader.
Well, yeah, and that's part of your job.
Yeah.
I could not wait to get to work every day, even on the bad days, and there were a lot of bad days. I mean, we were in the midst of the worst recession since the Great Depression.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, you're in the finance and banking industry. You lived it too. Tampa was knocked flat. It was very much like my career at that point, my political career. So what was a great story was how Tampa got up off the mat and how I got up off the mat, and together we kind of changed.
Rose from the ashes.
Yeah, we really did. But yeah, part of that is being Tampa's best cheerleader, driving that narrative, talking to people about how, in spite of the darkness of the recession, how it's always light at the dawn, and if we stick together and pull together, we can get to that promised land, if you will. And I think over that 8 years, people got up and they believed, and they saw it wasn't just political happy talk. They saw results like the Riverwalk and the transformation of downtown, and Water Street emerging, and there was a sense of pride, and that optimism became part of Tampa's DNA. And so to this day, people will see me and they'll repeat back verbatim parts of speeches that I gave. One, because I gave them so often,
right? Yeah,
and very rarely strayed from the message.
I probably could do it. I remember.
I'm sure you could, Owen. You've listened to so many of them.
You actually said at some point in time, you're like, "Oh, you're here again." Oh, you probably could get up here and do this speech. So what I think of the Buckhorn administration, I mean, some of the things you just mentioned. So redevelopment, revitalization of downtown, finishing the Riverwalk after 6 mayors, economic development, helping secure the infrastructure funding for Water Street, and it's turned out just incredible. Mayor's Neighborhood University, which I was one of the first graduates of, I think.
Great program.
That was great. I enjoyed it. But what are you most proud of during your administration?
You know, you're going to laugh. It's not the brick and mortar stuff. I mean, that will live on forever. What I'm proud of is that Tampa got its swagger back. And after literally being knocked flat during that recession, we got back up. We decided that we are going to be better, that we're going to survive this, we're going to get through this, and that at the end of the day, we're going to compete with any city for any opportunity, any event, any young professional. I mean, because you remember when our young professionals, our kids and grandkids, were leaving Tampa to go to Charlotte or Austin or Atlanta.
A lot of brain drain. It was sad.
Oh, it was terrible because there was no hope here. There was no opportunities. We have now become the destination for that talent in America.
It is amazing, the transformation.
Oh, and to see these young professionals and to see, like, my daughters coming home from college and staying here, whereas 10 years ago they weren't, that to me is a legacy that I'm happy to leave. And so while, yeah, I walk around and I see Water Street and the Riverwalk and, you know, everyone's very appreciative, to me that attitude and that swagger is far more important because it will carry us through decades of ups and downs.
Well, goal accomplished, because I remember you saying you don't want your daughters to leave.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, I ran a whole campaign on that.
Yeah.
Now, they were only like 6 and 5, so they weren't going anywhere. But every grandparent...
But that day would come, right?
Yeah, they understood exactly what I was talking about because they were losing their sons and daughters to other cities.
So you had the countdown clock.
I did.
In your office.
Yeah, I did.
When that hit 0, was there something that you just felt was unfinished business that you wish you had
Always.
more time?
Always.
So what was it?
You know, the job's never done as mayor. A city's always emerging and growing and changing and morphing. And so while you would like to be mayor for life, term limits doesn't allow that. But yeah, there's many more chapters to write in Tampa's history. And, you know, certainly I would have liked to, finish some of the stuff downtown Tampa and the connections between Channelside and Ybor. Making sure that all of our neighborhoods prosper, not just some of our neighborhoods. We really invested in a lot of parks and recreation facilities in some of our tougher neighborhoods. So yeah, you'd like to finish the job, but you also recognize that your job's never done. I certainly would have loved to have had the resources that Mayor Castor has had, as the economy recovered and rebounded. And,
sure.
Because, literally, in the 8 years that I was there, we didn't get back because of the recession and because of the Save Our Homes referendum that was passed years ago, where the decline in property taxes inured to the benefit of everybody because they paid lower property taxes. But that's also the revenue that the city needs to run.
Yeah.
And so...
It was about a 20% decline.
Oh, my gosh. It was like... we did not get back to 2007 revenues until I left office in 2019. Yeah. So all of the stuff that you've seen done during that period of time literally was done with no money, with a lot of duct tape and a lot of creative thought to be able to pull that stuff off. And so, that's different now because the city's relatively flush. But yeah, there's a lot more chapters to write. And the key is, Owen, that who's ever the mayor or the leadership in the business community has got to get up every day and recognize that you're in a fight. And I don't say that in a unkind way, but you're competing for talent, you're competing for jobs, you're competing for opportunities. And just like we snuck up on Charlotte and we snuck up on Nashville and we snuck up on some of these other emerging Sunbelt cities that were taking our kids, there are 5 cities waiting to take our position at the top of that heap. And so you got to get up every day and put the eye black on and realize you're in the fight. And if you don't, that momentum will wane. You will have distractions and dysfunctions within the business community. Not everyone will be singing off the same page because they're not being disciplined about it. And that's where you get folks who do drama. And the last thing we as a community need are elected leaders or business leaders that are more interested in drama and dysfunction than they are in executing and everyone driving.
I won't share who shared this, but an elected official had a conversation, and their advice was just stop electing crazy people.
Well, that helps. Yeah, that's always a good start.
But it drives me crazy when we talk about things other than real issues, policy, what's driving jobs, who's going to pick up my trash, who's going to fix the roads, transportation. We lost out on the train when you were mayor. So what are the keys to sustainable growth? I mean, so we've had tremendous growth. Everything seems to be firing on all cylinders. It really is our time. I mean, you used to say that all the time. It's our time. It is. And the rest of the nation sees it. With that comes challenges like transportation. And so what are the keys to sustainable growth?
We've been very successful over the last 10 years as we've emerged not only out of the recession, but emerged onto the national and international stage as a destination for the best and the brightest, and a place that is one of the hottest real estate markets in the country. But with those successes comes challenges. And infrastructure would be at the top of that list, because if you don't have, you can't build a house on a shaky foundation. And so people are coming to Tampa and the Tampa Bay area because we're a great destination. There's a lot of opportunities here. We have a diverse community. We celebrate that diversity as a strength. We don't listen to the noise in Tallahassee or the noise in Washington, D.C. This is a place where everybody is welcome. And as a result of that, people are coming. Thousands of people are coming. That's not going to stop.
That's a key point, whether we want them to or not. So the whole NIMBY movement that, I don't want anybody else to come. We don't have a choice. We've created an attractive and amazing place to live.
Well, and if you don't grow, you die.
Yes.
And cities that aren't growing around the country.
People miss that.
Are dying. But we also have an obligation to prepare for that, to build what's necessary, roads, sewers, bridges, all the stuff that's not sexy. We need mobility options. Part of that includes transit. We need law enforcement that is capable of keeping up with the influx of folks and adding police officers and firefighters and the infrastructure associated with that. It's expensive. And people need to recognize that with this prosperity comes challenges that cost money. If you don't invest in that infrastructure, and the All for Transportation referendum, I thought, was going to be our salvation for the next.
Well, and you led the charge in that too, didn't you?
I did, and it broke my heart to see a small group of partisan judges and elected officials undermined the will of the people on that.
And it was. I think it was like 60% of the vote.
Oh,
right?
yeah. The people want it. They recognize that growth costs.
Yep.
You can't do it paying as you go. It takes a dedicated revenue source to be able to build these projects because they're 30-year projects. We've got to fix that. We have got to have a dedicated revenue source.
So how do we fix it?
We're going to have to keep going to the voters until we get a referendum that can withstand scrutiny. I thought the scrutiny and the judgment by the Supreme Court was political. I don't think it was based in reality. But we got to keep getting up off the mat and going back to the voters. And I think the voters are smart enough to realize that this stuff costs money. In city, you can't look under the municipal couch cushions to get enough money to build the type of infrastructure that we need. And it's got to be options. Mass transit may not make sense in Balm, Florida, but in downtown Tampa, to get from downtown to the airport to connect to the high-speed rail that is coming from Orlando to Tampa, the internal circulators and the mobility options within downtown, mass transit has got to be part of that equation, as does a bus system that actually works. So, you can't stick your head in the sand and say, oh, okay, we're just going to keep building roads. No, that's not going to work.
Do we need a regional transit?
I think we're of the size that it's about time we take a good hard look at it.
Okay. I'm in favor of it. I was just curious.
Certainly the bus system, I think, is worthy of looking at. In Hillsborough County, the bus system struggles badly, really badly. We're funded at about a third of the level of a city of our size should be. Pinellas is a little bit more robust because they're denser and they've been at it for a little bit longer.
I would tell you, having worked in Pinellas now for 5 years, I mean, PSTA does a great job.
Yeah. Yeah.
PTSA.
Yeah, and we need a bus system for not just riders of necessity, but riders of choice.
Yeah.
There's no reason why me living on Davis Islands shouldn't be able to take a bus that has regular routes into downtown Tampa. I mean, I would take it.
Sure.
I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area. We took buses. and
Man, it's
Metro
right
all
here,
the time.
right? Why not?
Yeah. So we got to stop thinking like a suburban community and start looking at ourselves as an urban community and make those philosophical changes.
One of the things I admired about your administration too, and gosh, I wish I would have looked up her name, but your former CFO,
Sonia Little.
Sonia Little,
Yeah, rock star.
Man, she was amazing.
Oh,
And I loved Sonia.
Yeah.
But the people you had surrounded yourself with were impressive, and to me, that's the key of any team, right? I mean, you hire quality, sharp people that are motivated, that are self-starters, and just get out of the way. And you just kind of help lead strategy and help them stay motivated. But so what was your kind of secrets to success in attracting those type of people to your administration?
Thank you, first of all. And yeah, I was really blessed and lucky to have a team with me that I would put up against any mayoral administration in the country. I didn't know whether they were Democrats or Republicans. I didn't care.
Who cares?
Yeah.
They do a good job, right?
But we were able to put together folks who believed in the mission, who executed on it, who were extremely competent. Whether was Sonia Little who helped navigate us out of that recession. Mm-hmm. She was a former investment banker, and if you think about this, and as a banker yourself, you'll really appreciate this. In spite of being mired in the worst recession since the Great Depression, the city received 12 credit rating increases during my 8 years as mayor, which is almost unheard of.
That's amazing.
Which was a tribute to how we ran the administration and the discipline. And how conservative we were about how we were spending it, and how Wall Street and the financial markets recognized that we were willing to make the tough decisions, even at great political cost to me, in terms of raising revenue and doing what it took to maintain the wastewater system and the water system. And I had a great team. They largely stuck with me to the very end. The only two exceptions were two folks who got great opportunities outside of my administration, and I was so proud of them. One of them was Santiago Carrata, who was my chief of staff, who went over to take over the Visitors and Convention Bureau.
Been on the podcast too.
Yeah, and he's just killing it over there.
He's great. Yeah, he's
killing
doing a heck of a job.
And the other one was Jim Schimberg, who was my city attorney, who went to become the general counsel for Jeff Finnick.
Yeah.
Other than that, almost all of them stayed till the very end, and they're all doing great things now. So yeah, I couldn't be prouder of them. It's they were top notch, and they, I may have been the mayor, but it was their skills that helped this city really move.
So there is speculation.
Oh yeah,
I don't know if it's speculation or
Yeah.
just maybe willful thinking, wishful thinking that you may run again for mayor. So do you have a little Dick Greco second second wind in you?
It's interesting. When I left in 2019, I was term limited out, so I couldn't run again. I assumed that I was done. I felt fortunate to have had the opportunity to serve. I felt fortunate that I was able to go out at the top of my game. When in my reelect in 2015, we won 95% of the vote.
Has anybody ever won that much?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah. I feel really complimented by that. So I figured I was done. I had passed the torch to Mayor Jane, who had worked for me, who I love dearly, and figured, okay, you had a great run, you did your time. City's a different place. Now it's time for the next mayor. Mayor Jane is termed out in 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of concern about who might follow her for some of the same reasons that we talked about the necessity to maintain that momentum and the ability to put together a great team and deal with some of the challenges that we face. So I'm getting a lot of inquiries. It wasn't something that I was planning on doing, but I'm also not going to let anybody come in and undo the progress that has been made. And Tampa has been lucky. Certainly in my lifetime, we've had a series of good mayors who were the right people at the right time. And that office is so powerful that if you get a bad one, it can be really bad. You can reverse virtually all of the positive things that have happened. So the answer is maybe.
Okay.
It's not something I take lightly. Fortunately, the voters can't turn my hair any whiter. They already
You still have your hair.
I still have it.
It looks
Yeah,
good.
yeah. They took care of that. It's a little bit longer than it once was, but I'm getting it cut tomorrow. And I also recognize that campaigns are always about the future. And so as good a run as I had for those 8 years, that's a great starting point, but I can't run on my accomplishments of those 8 years. I need to run on a vision for the next 8 years. So,
Well, I'm going to draw an analogy to after city council. You went into the dark for 8 years.
I did.
So you've been in the dark. You're coming back out. What's the future of Tampa look like?
I think it's bright. I think it's really bright. I think we just need to make sure that momentum doesn't stop. I think we need to make sure that some of those challenges that we've already talked about are dealt with. I think there are some issues of inequality in some of our neighborhoods that need to be talked about and resolved. Change is scary for people, and we're seeing our city change before our eyes, and that disrupts lives, if you will, and it causes some uncertainty. But I think as a community, I think our future is pretty darn bright. And for me, it's going to be about finishing what I started and finishing what Jane has continued. But I think there's another chapter to write that really is going to be just as bright as the last 10 years have been. But it takes discipline, and it takes experience, and it takes a vision, and it takes a willingness to articulate that message and deliver that speech, not stop. So until people absorb it and they see what the future looks like, I'm excited about our future, and I'm excited about finishing that chapter and then turning it over to the next generation.
Well, I hope you truly consider a Buckhorn 2.0 administration, and
thanks.
I'd love to see that. But Bob, anything else you want to add?
No. Thank you guys for doing this and hosting this, and obviously the Bank of Tampa has been a big part of our success, and certainly your founders and your board members and the folks who work here are integral to that. And we all just got to keep preaching the gospel of Tampa and giving people opportunities as you guys do through your lending, and let's start building things and moving this city forward. You and I have kids that we got to turn it over to.
That's right. No, I love it. Mayor Bob, if people want to find you or potentially donate to a future campaign, how do they do that?
They always know how to find me, but
in the grocery store.
In the grocery store at Publix, yeah. I'm always there with my honey-do list.
Well, Mr. Mayor, thank you for joining us on Money Market.
Thanks, Owen.
So if you have any questions or future show idea or would like to be a sponsor, you can send us a message at moneymarket@bankoftampa.com or find us on LinkedIn, X, Facebook, and on Instagram at Bank of Tampa and online at bankoftampa.com. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for subscribing, and we'll see you around in the Money Market.